So really building SOPs, KPIs, and looms, just everything so that that person can take over from day one, despite the SOPs and the looms. So that's like the biggest thing that I would say is like having an SOP and KPIs associated, whether it be an executive assistant, marketing person, acquisitions person, whomever. What are they going to do and how often are they going to do it, and have that going in just tremendous. And I would highly recommend having that built before you hire anyone.
You're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools.
You start with something small.
You'll never get your entire organization if you don't pull off operations.
Don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have a blast today. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we talk about the art and the science of delegation and how to get your time back. Today, I have Mike Taravella. He's a good friend. We met through a mastermind that we are part of. It's Go Bonus. And with that, Mike, please share our background with the audience. And I'm super pumped for our chat.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcia, for having me. Yeah. I like to tell everyone I'm a reformed CPA turned real estate investor turned ironic stand-up comic. But I haven't quit my day job yet. So yeah, we own we are the general partners on 400 units, which in the podcast world, people like to think they own 400 units, but we own a small percentage of those 400 units. And we third-party asset manage another 800 units across the country for clients within the same mastermind, but across just people struggled with ownership and rents haven't gone up 20% like they have. So they're having a bad time and we're here to help. And we're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We primarily buy apartments in Tennessee, North Carolina, and Denver, Colorado. And we're just kind of, my brand, Value Add Mike, and just here to help operators, whether it be multifamily. I used to, in a past life, work for a family office in Detroit with Dan Gilbert, helping 14 startups from esports to tech, media production, with an audit background from Ernst & Young. So just the traditional sexy path to a comic at the end of the day and real estate investor. So we have a team of 5 people, which I'm sure we're going to talk about kind of how we found those people and where they are from. But I'm proudly say that we have no American employees, just American partners that we help trying to scale our team and help our team members take over the world together.
I love it, man. And now everybody's curious about your best joke, so you can either save for the next time or let us know.
They can't afford it. We'll see if they get past the real estate advice and really make sure they get with the funny jokes. But every real estate environment, I was just like, interest rates, am I right? And that usually goes okay.
I love it, man. So cool. Well, the first question I have is, what's the biggest challenge you face when first learning to delegate tasks to VAs or not, right? Local employees.
Yeah, so I think the first problem I had was everyone on the internet to scale and grow and get bigger and faster and just hire people, and then all of your problems go away. And then come to find out, that's the absolute opposite of how it usually works. So that's why I commend Marcio for just being a resource of just all things delegation, because you've helped me tremendously of just what we're looking for and add more criteria. Similar to buying properties, we're very picky. And I think we have to handle that when it comes to delegation. So a lot of the biggest things that I've seen is people don't have systems. And then EJ Seller really explained it best of, we need to have the KPIs of that person. Because for an executive assistant, having, hey, you need to be 5 out of 5 days of inbox 0 by the end of the day. Hey, 0 double booked meetings for me. And just a lot of those little things built out, because everyone, 4-hour work week and all these, you want to hire a bunch of people to do everything. But then once they start, you're like, what do I do? And you're like, everything. So really building SOPs, KPIs, and looms, just everything so that that person can take over from day one. Would be the biggest thing, because I've hired people who their first task was to download 94 PDFs. they did 17 after 2 days and go, I'm done. And I'm like, what? So it's despite the SOPs and the looms. So that's like the biggest thing that I would say is like having an SOP and KPIs associated, whether it be an executive assistant, marketing person, acquisitions person, whomever. What are they going to do and how often are they going to do it, and have that going in is just tremendous. And I would highly recommend having that built before you hire anyone.
Man, I love that, Mike, because basically I see that often, right? Well, let's hire this amazing person and then just say, abdicate after that instead of delegate. And you said the KPIs, right? I love it. You have to have a structure, otherwise it's kind of rough to really get going from the VA side or from the employee side, whatever. Now let me go on a quick side note here on this same, because we hear a lot all the time within the circles that we are at. Oh, let's just hire this integrator or this general manager, and they're gonna fix all my. I don't have to be involved. This is beautiful, and then you can get in some nuances here. If it's a mature company versus a early stages company, and in my opinion, and I want to hear your opinion, but my view is that for a mature company, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But for early stages, like you don't even have a KPI set up and you just want to hire a random person to do all that for you and be inside your brain, which is impossible. So I don't know, just my soapbox for a minute. But what's your gut reaction to that thought?
Yeah, it always makes me laugh working with startups who, and this is with the family office I worked for, they want a Harvard MBA with 12 years experience, with all the qualifications, but them to work for $40,000. And you're like, what? And no equity. And it kills me because I think like as you're starting off, I take the sentiment of I don't want anyone within my industry, because I think there's a lot of like, if you're coming from this industry, no matter where you are, there's sentiments of like how long things take. There's like, this is how long it is and it's good enough, and it's hard to uproot from that. So I would rather have someone not in my industry who I get to learn from, those early employees. Like I didn't want to hire someone with commercial real estate experience, because I underwrite a very particular way and have built a system, and I want him to see exactly how I do. And that took 6 months of SOPs and deal reviews and everything. But I'd rather have someone who's bought into you and your vision and your culture, who can do majority of those things well. When I say well, good enough, because I think that's also a trap for entrepreneurs. Like, well, they didn't do XYZ good. And they're like, well, they just started. There's a cultural barrier. There's a language barrier. Like, good enough is fine. But I'd rather see people hire project managers who are just like, let's get, and Layla Hermosi has content on this of like, your first hire is a project manager or an executive assistant who's like, we're here to get stuff done. I don't care what it is, where it is, who it is, but you don't need an integrator. You eventually will. Mm-hmm. But like day one, first employee or team member, I hate the word employee. First team member is someone who's just bought in, who's like, let's get stuff done. As you scale and grow and become more mature, and you're like, okay, I see these KPIs, and have implemented like an EOS or an OKR system, then you can talk that. But get someone who can get stuff done.
And it's flexible to change things. A simple example from my launching new company now, it's like I had someone as a SDR trying to, send cold emails, et cetera, and that was not turning out to a result we wanted. We just transitioned her into admin, doing all things, social media, this and that, and she was very happy. So that's exactly my experience as well. Now, how can leaders identify tasks they should delegate versus handle themselves?
I think the biggest thing in entrepreneurs who are like, I'm the best and the greatest at this thing, I challenge you to be like, how do you replace yourself from everything? And I think those are I kind of believe, my firm belief is, how do you get rid of yourself from like the bigger tasks that are impeding 90%? I think Jason Dries posed this question. What's the one problem that it will, if I solve this problem, solves the 90%? Right? For me, October 15th is coming up and I haven't done my 2023 taxes yet. So that was a big problem waiting on me. And with my executive assistant, we're already thinking of 2024 because I frantically was doing them the last weekend, which is ironic because being a former CPA, you're like, wow, you'd think this would be all buttoned up and ready to go. But as an entrepreneur, very different hat. But that problem like waned over my head. And so I'm like, hey, executive assistant, let's build a system where we look at our bookkeeping numbers every single week. Is there reimbursements? What do I need to invoice? What do I need? Like, what are these transactions? Knowing this person is not a bookkeeper, but that's the big problem that was been weighing on my head for this. Also, like, is setting up a newsletter. I'm great at operations, but I don't have the time to market. Well, I'm learning to prioritize more marketing as we hire more team members for operations, but then that gets more investors in the door. So I think I just challenge and another team member, we're having her replace myself from all property manager meetings. We review those. And it's not just a here, go do it. There's a review process of like what went well, what could we improve on, and then we have KPIs on the back end every single week that we're reviewing to measure did we make the right decisions. So I would say, what are the things that you hate doing is one. What are the things that are impeding your growth as a leader in a company would be like 1B. And then from there, it's just making you never fully delegate. And even like my inbox, it's taken 4 months, and now we're at a good rhythm with my team or executive team assistant to make sure that we're doing the right things. So it never goes away, but you just have to make sure you're constantly measuring and they're taking over instead of you keeping your hands in everything.
I love it. And it's the famous trust but verify, right? Every once in a while, and having visibility. That's the other thing I've learned. You don't have to be everywhere in the business, but you need to have the ability to have visibility of about everything that's happening through either reports or something.
Yeah, check. It's spot check, right? Like because I'm a firm believer, if you find one error, that's not the only one. And if it's and we've reiterated with our team, if this thing that we've gone over countless times is wrong, we have to rebuild that foundation. And I ask our team, what went wrong and how could we never do it again? Because then is it a system issue? Is it a communication issue? Is it a channeling issue? It allows you to get to the root of the problem, and you're not just being like the boss and saying this is wrong, right? You're really a problem solver to make sure it doesn't happen again. Whether you use like automation software like Make.com or Zapier, or you just tweak the system or a video or SOP. But that really, I think, helps you as a leader show your vulnerableness, and even casting that vision of what you're aiming for. Because I've done that with my team, and they've risen up from that and have taken ownership of it. And it's been cool to see. And I've been like, I was terrified to tell them because I didn't think they would like want to lead, but I shared why. Because my goal of July of next year is to get out of the day-to-day as asset management. I'll still be involved, but as our syndication company and operations, we want to buy more and we have to raise more. And so if I can train our team this year to go through the chaos of problems that we've solved for and still be there, we can raise more and truly take over the world with our systems and our people and our technology.
And you touched a little bit, but how do you ensure accountability when you're delegating the tasks to a VA or a team member?
Yeah, and I struggled with this because I don't like to micromanage. No one wants to be babysat, and I don't monitor screen time or screen shares or just like it just if you have to do that going in, you're not one giving them enough or two trust them enough. But I think the big thing is just I give people time expectations of, hey, this takes me 2 hours. I'm expecting you for the first time 4 to 6 hours. So periodically during the day, I'm doing a check-in. How's it going? What questions do you have? And I've implemented a rule. If you're stuck in 30 minutes and can't get out of it, message me. Because you have to create rules of engagement, and it starts with you as a leader for those engagements. And so I just want to make sure my team knows I'm available for them. They probably think I work too much, but it's just so, random ADD thoughts, which is fine. And I know they'll giggle at that when they watch this. But it's just important that you create rules of engagement and follow up. And then I think the big thing is paint what done looks like. And and that's a function of, does this document do what it says it's going to do? What does it look like? What are you going to do next with it? Because I think a lot of new team members struggle with like, oh, I did this thing and I'm done for the day. And then they don't tell you, but it's like, hey, it's got to go to this team member, to this team member, to this investor. So it's just sharing the bigger picture, which I know can be a lot, but just regraining into the why behind it really allows you to think, is this SOP necessary or process, or how could we make it that much better?
Now, getting practical here with our audience, do you have a real life example of something you delegated and really transformed your productivity or the business?
Yeah. So as a data nerd, which I think we both can come from, or we're like absolute nerds with great personalities. I think the biggest thing that I delegated was a dashboard of all 47 properties that we own and third-party asset manage. And so we have every property has the same weekly doc, but our team created one dashboard. And I call it like the foundation of truth, because if there's problems, we go through and like click through it and just see like what properties are doing well, what properties are doing poorly, understanding the why. And that's been like the coolest thing I've ever delegated, and be like, I've shown people and I brag about them, and I'm like, our team is amazing. My executive assistant, we closed a deal 2 weeks ago, and he saw our previous email campaigns, took the appraisal and just like created a closing email and sent it to investors. And I was like, and so I think the biggest thing with like, it's just like the delegation is 1 + 1 = 3, of like, if it's done well, it's great. If not, it's like nails on a chalkboard, and we're like, whoa, what happened? Like, it's like, we're sharing all the good stories, but like there's stories of someone worked 4 hours and then never heard from them again.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of buddies accidentally overpaying team members, and then they just quit the next day and never hear from them again and can't get their money back. And I don't say this with pride. And this is what led to me like working with Marcio, was in 4 to 5 months, I hired and fired 7 people. And it was because I scaled too quick. We were doing very big projects, and I just needed as much help as I could. And I know with my SOPs and my looms and all my systems that it would work. But it was unfair to the team members I hired, because I didn't give them enough time to train them or give them enough space to learn and ask questions. Some of it was like, hey, the time zone didn't work. But a lot of it, like I realized before working with Marcia, like, hey, my process is broken. I need to go to someone else. And Marcio has been like a wealth of knowledge. And he didn't pay me to say this, I promise. But I've learned so much in such a short period of time, and I've hired the people we're hiring are infinitely better because of you and your team, Marcio.
Oh man, no, I appreciate the plug. No, I appreciate that, and happy to help there. Now, what role does trust play in delegation, and how can leaders build it with their team? Just building trust. That's often we hear that from entrepreneurs, like, how can I trust someone, either with my email or something like that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's my favorite, because they're like, what if they do this? And you're like, well, that's going to happen, right? Like, no one buys an apartment and like expects their property manager to steal from them, but that still happens. Like, I think an American can steal something just as much as anyone around the world. So the fact that like local and the trust, but I work with it in terms of milestones. So on our asset management side, anyone who's new is doing the pulses, because this allows them to see all the different properties, their numbers. Are they doing well? Are they not doing well? And just really gets their feet wet of it. And then if they do that well, they can do the comps, and like they slowly build on that. So start with a foundational task. My executive assistant, was I giving them my credit card, social, and everything day one? Absolutely not, as you shouldn't do with a stranger. But it's like, hey, let's go through the inbox. And I think spending an hour plus, when you onboard an executive assistant, There's a lot of resources like once you hire them, your life gets so much easier. It takes 4 to 6 months just to understand how you operate. Who are you like dealing with life with? What are your expectations? Like it takes so much time in that role. So pack patience, but at the same time, it just start with email, then calendar, then marketing. I think Dan Martell has like the ring of admin, but start with one thing and don't add anything else because it takes them time. And if you just flood them, you're not setting them up for success. And you wouldn't do that with a team member in America that's sitting next to you. You wouldn't give them 400 things. So don't do that with someone else who's overseas, who doesn't have the convenience of asking you a question right there. And just follow up of like, what questions you have. I'm here for you. Because they have to trust you as well. It's a new team member for both sides. So I think that's always just as important as you trusting them as they trust you to take care of them.
I love it, man. Yeah. So delegating or building that trust over time. And I heard this quote. So micromanage until you trust. This is in a different sense, not the trust about the information that you're sharing, but just a day to day. So, and I kind of use that on my day to day when I'm managing. I in the beginning I'm micromanaging, and then I get out of that as trust is building on the results, etc. Now, something I do there as well, like you said, my assistant, she knows the social security of everybody in the 4 of us in our family. She has everything. Why? Well, because I need that. For example, I need her. She's working right now in that, getting me an interview for that global entry, so I can travel, and when you get to the airport, you just pass through the security or whatever. Well, either I'm gonna do that or she's gonna do that, and for her to do it, she needs the info. It's like, okay, so it's always that the trading and building systems too. Just a side comment on the financial side, right? Transactions, someone can enter the transaction and another person can approve, or etc. From that standpoint, I don't know if you've done anything on the financial side with someone remote, as far as someone entering transactions and you approving, or how is that going?
Yeah, there's levels of approval, and just with our we're working with startups, there's always levels of approval just to make sure. And we just set up kind of we're not at that phase yet. Generally, how we've done transaction is we use 1Password. So our executive assistant, like he was booking a bus in Munich because me and my girlfriend are going there. So literally he mapped out prices for planes and buses and trains. Once we picked the right medium based on the value, I then gave like a 1Password with that link. And it was even funnier because at one point I had to just send him a credit card photo, and he took it and he goes, just a reminder to delete the photo. So it's we haven't yet, but there's so many layers, and like view only access for your bank accounts if you're having budgeting issues, or if you need approvals over X amount of dollars. Like those things exist. And I think there's just a lot of scarcity when people dealing with virtual teams that people can steal. But I think like an American has more access to steal, and there's just that false sense of trust. So it's just, I don't know, there's bad people everywhere around the world. Obviously, if you vet them, do checks and references, there's ways to vet it, but no one's perfect and stuff happens. But as long as you have those systems in place to protect you to minimize that damage is tremendous. And it's very, very easy to do. And working with your bank, Wise for payments, like there's countless ways to do it.
I love it. And to wrap up this topic of delegation, what advice would you give to someone hesitant about delegating more tasks?
Yeah, so I think like the first task I ever delegated was grocery shopping. Like Instacart saved my relationship, mainly because like we joked, but we would literally like me and my girlfriend would go pick up the groceries and then walk them back. And then one day my girlfriend had something happened in Chicago. So it's snowing and I come with our little cart and they're like, oh, where's your girlfriend? And they're like, oh, she's gone. And they all laughed at me because I'm trudging through the snow with 10 pounds of sweet potatoes, 10 gallons of bone broth, lugging this. And I was like, we're done. And we started with Instacart. And literally the first day we used Instacart, it was like we got toilet paper, we got everything. And it's pouring rain in Chicago. And literally like this person was me 2 weeks ago, just like, here you go. Now we tip them well, right, for what they did. But that hour and hour saved me so much like relief and energy. So you can start as small as that, Instacart, grocery shopping, TaskRabbit. Like I'm not even gonna lie. For the like, I'm paying someone to install a bidet in our new apartment today. Right. So like it can be as small as that. I mean, start with something small until you feel comfortable. I will say you may feel guilt when you start, but I think that's just like the trap of like, it costs money, I'm not worth it. Like if I think, is that your highest and best use of time? Like if you read a book, learn a skill, cold call people for an hour, that's why you feel the guilt, because you're not replacing it with that thing of what you should be doing. And that's a very different conversation. But start small, be incremental, be strategic, and you can literally live life knowing the game of you can build your life to do whatever you want. If you don't want to check your email, set up a weekly call with your EA or hire one, or, there's just countless ways to do it. So just start small and build up to it where you feel comfortable of delegating. And guess what? People are going to mess up, and that's okay. That's life.
Normal. And you mentioned about mess up, and something that I've learned over the years, at least that has worked for me, and especially when you're talking about spreadsheets, 1% error rate. And you were talking earlier about, everyone's going to make mistakes. And roughly 1%, I believe once I Google was the human error rate was 1%. So if someone is making a mistake, 20% mistakes on a spreadsheet, that's bad. But if it's 0, it's about impossible. So the 1% is an interesting rule that worked for me. So just a sidebar on that, on what you said there.
To that point, right? Is it the human's error, or is it the human who made the SOP, the human who made the loom?
Yeah.
Because I've been in jobs where I got trained terribly wrong and literally almost got fired because I was like, this is how I was trained. So have a lot less ego in terms of what you delegate, and just be like a student of like, hey, what could we have done differently? How can I better communicate? Like how powerful how questions will allow you to get there. Because once you have an ego delegating, no one's gonna like you.
I love it. What has been one book or resource that has changed your life on this topic of either delegation or management or leadership?
Yeah, I think Delegation is Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. Love the book. I'm not going to lie, as a nerd who just died, as a nerd and going through it, it's like just hire someone and your life gets easier. You're like, yeah, but how? So that's why like Layla Hermosi's content on YouTube has been tremendous. And then on Twitter, I pulled this up, Output Thinking by John Safer. He's the book that kind of helped me realize every job has KPIs. Like you're going to do this every week, this every day. And it's, did we do it or not? And that's helped tremendously. So, and it just made me clear of who we need to hire, because you think who you need to hire, but if you write it down what you're doing and really plan those KPIs, you're like, oh, this is a more analytical person than I need versus a qualitative person.
I love it, man. So anything else that we didn't talk about that you'd like to add?
I think the biggest thing when you delegate, there's a free up of time that happens that feels weird, and no one, I feel like, talks about it. Right. Once you like, because there's technology leverage, there's all financial leverage, there's investments. But once you get human leverage, the game gets different. And I think like in my 20s, I'm 32, turning 33 in November. My 20s, my identity was getting things done. People could count on me to get it done. Now that we've had 5 team members, from acquisitions to asset management, there's like an identity crisis of like, oh, I can do it and get it done versus my team doing it. And so you just have to continue to pour into your team to shape and mold the identity that you want your team to have. And it takes, like, we do weekly one-on-ones. We do 2-hour trainings on Monday. So like my big thing is making sure I'm pouring, like those lulls in time where I have freedom. I have freedom. I'm not like gun to my head, like, do this. But that time is spent doing strategy and training with our team, which feels, because it just, there's like this identity thing that happens when it just like it messed with me for like a couple months. One, it was like I can't find the right people. Then I realized I didn't know how to hire, and now that I have the right people, I'm spending time strategizing and working on the business versus and it feels weird. So that's why I'm spending more of my time of where do I need to train the people to remove me from the business. And having that, I'm working through getting through that like guiltiness of it. Because like I worked hard. I know you worked hard in all of your businesses, and it's okay to leverage. And there's this like initial guilt you feel, but continue to pour into your team through strategy and vision building. And that's okay. And give yourself the grace to have that time for yourself and your family or whatever fuels you the best.
I love it, man. I can for sure relate to that. And on that note there, let me see, it's escaping me here. What is something that you, and I said it was the last question, but it was not. What is something that you have not delegated that is the next thing to delegate?
So as part of me and just with investor relations, the next thing we're going to be doing, because we're really good at managing the assets and like being thorough with our systems. We have the scale for buying assets. The next component that we're delegating is investor relations components. So we started with the active campaign and just like email newsletters. The next thing we're going to be doing is re-engaging our YouTube, which means I'm going to be posting more. And I can tell you the whole SOP, but that's the next thing I'm training, because I just want to, like, hearing Dan Martell, and I'm sure you have 10 different systems in the back end. Once this gets done recording, they'll just go off into the ether. But I just want to create value for our investors and just delegating that through our YouTube channel and just being much more intentional with YouTube. It's the second largest search engine. I want to make videos. And even it was cool because I went to a wedding, quasi high school reunion, and all my friends like growing up were like, I watch your YouTube videos. I was like, oh my God, I didn't talk to this person for 10 years, but they're like keeping in touch through content. So I think it's just making sure that continuing to add value and just really, we had the editor, but we were in a money crunch as we continue to scale. But I just want to make sure that we're continuing to help as many people and leading with value on the content side. So that's the next thing we're going to be delegating is ideas, postings, all the things that are related to social media we'll be working on.
Wow, I love it. And you know what? You probably heard about that, the levers from that Naval talks about, the 4 levers. And I don't know if the folks, I'm sure some have heard about that it's, you basically have capital. Okay, that's the leverage that everyone talks about. And then you have code. I'm not a coder, so I'm not going to play on that one for a long time, or either me or someone. I don't plan to be on the software business in the short midterm. So that's a no for me right now. Media is the one you talked about, which is high leverage. You're sleeping and people are watching our content. And then the last one is human capital. So basically what I'm hearing for you, you're leveraging capital, media, and human capital. Maybe not cold right now. I don't know.
Well, that's my business. I'm better at delegating than my business partner. For automations, make.com, which is similar to Zapier, he created a comp analysis sheet that reviews all of our comps for our Denver portfolio. And he's been working on it for months. It's no code, but so my job is to protect his time so he can just nerd out on that so we can automate. But automation, we use ChatGPT a ton as well for the code of terms of like what we can automate. And prompt engineering. Like I push our team to be like, ask ChatGPT is like, as whatever role you're looking for, asset managers, Gary V, whomever you want to idolize, and ask that person a question or a spreadsheet, like prompt. That's where I realized as humans we're really bad at asking questions because we're not specific, and then we get mad at a robot for being wrong. And it's like, well, you asked the question. Maybe that's a you problem.
We need to have a version of ChatGPT that's like mean, like,
Yeah.
hey, ask a better question now. I
Yeah.
like it.
So yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to communication, because especially with people in different cultures, and as English potentially as a second language, or it's just words, and even just with my coaching, words matter so much. And so I'm being a better version for my team in terms of what I say, because it's I think one of the prouder moments that we had this week, in the last week, is we were on a huddle, and our team member, our partner is very analytical, as I am, and she goes, I didn't like what this manager said, so his name is Nick. I went Nick mode, and I went all thorough on all of our audits and all of these things to prove that what she said was incorrect. And that's not something you teach. It's just something you live by example. And that's kind of the coolest part, is like someone overseas or in a different country is managing hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, but is implementing those day-to-day things in terms of communication that there couldn't have never been a training of like, prove this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But the team is they care so much, want to learn so much, are curious so much, and want to do a good job. And it's just, a financial manager who had no real estate experience 5-6 months ago is now wanting to learn more about refinances and how we do things and what we can do. And it's like,
cool, man. Good stuff. Mike, thanks so much for our time. I really enjoyed the chat. I learned as much as the audience did, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, and look forward to helping you take over the world.
Same here, man.